Hi there, and welcome to the channel. This particular channel is going to be mainly tech focused, although it's mainly a side channel for a much larger project my wife and I are doing as far as for families with neurodiverse family members. So if you're interested in that, please check that out. We will be calling it Thursday's Child, and it should be launching shortly. As far as this goes, I'm going to be working on this particular juice box EVSE. We have an electric vehicle that we've had for the last 7 years. It's a Bolt EV from 2017 Chevrolet, and it's been very, very good to us. And at the time when we got that vehicle, we also got this juice box basically from the company called eMotorworks. They later sold it to another company, and the problem now is that particular company has chosen to discontinue the juice box line and essentially stop supporting all of these products, period. And that's been a big problem for owners. But the bigger problem for me in the last few years is just the fact that this unit has just gotten to be quite squirrely. It regularly throws errors. You basically will stop charging the vehicle. Even the car sometimes complains about the things that this thing will do. So it needs to be retired. And so what do? Well, there's a lot of different EVSE chargers that are out there, and there's other channels that speak much more on this particular subject. But I decided to do something that is not normally the choice, essentially, for most homeowners, and that's using a Ubiquiti Unifi EV station Lite. And so why do we do that? It's like, well, I'm already a Unifi owner. We've got a smart home, essentially, with Unifi equipment that is already the backbone of my networking topology. So I thought that maybe we could give this particular unit a try. It is a new product, fairly new product line, essentially, from Ubiquiti. They also have the EV Station Pro that has a much larger screen. It has some other particular features, but also costs about $1,200. This case is going to be about a $499 product that is competitive, essentially, with anything that you would see from ChargePoint or Grizzly or Tesla or any of those other particular types of chargers. So we're going to get this thing off the wall, and we've got an EV Station Lite that's already in stock, and we'll do an unboxing of that right after this, and you'll be able to see, as I do, sort of the whole process of actually sort of saying, you know, how can this actually help me? We're going to have a little bit of an unboxing here. So first of all, Unifi. You usually box these things pretty nicely from the stuff that I've gotten already. So let's go ahead and get this thing open. Which we actually have the real shipping box itself. It's nice, has a handle, even portable. So let's go ahead and tear off the okay. This thing opens up. All right. First of all, there's what usually passes for Unifi instructions these days, which is basically just a URL code. We've got our big, beefy, actual J1772 charging cable that is here. Okay, but this of course is attached to the unit, and here is the unit itself. or at least half of it. This is the back plate. Actually, no. First of all, installation guides, we've got our URL code there. And if we take this off, we actually see that this is the front plate of the unit, not the back plate. Okay. All right. We'll put that over here for right now. We will lift this up. Now, this little piece is the caddy that the unit actually goes to on the wall. Not to mention that there is a mounting thing that we can actually sort of use to figure out the screws on the wall. One of the things about the design of the Pro version of this is that the caddy is actually built into the side of the frame. And because the charging standards are going to be changing, essentially, or changing as we speak, from the J1772, this, to the Tesla cord, it means that if there was ever any particular upgrades for this particular line of products, at least for the Pro products, you would literally have to actually swap out the entire chassis, or at least I would think so. But in this case, I think it's technically possible that you could just actually do a new caddy, and then maybe you could actually take this thing apart, get the old cable out, and put a new one in. But that's just speculation. So, anyway. This is, we've got our leveling, which Unifi usually does in here. This is basically just a clamping bit, essentially, so that we can actually connect this actually to the outside. Now, this is something interesting, is that the Pro version comes with some tools and some accessories that this particular Lite version does not. And one of the things that that I've always sort of been curious about is the fact that in my garage, and I think I'll actually put a little bit of the video into this if I'm not already, I have this thing hooked up to a NEMA 1450 port. And the reason we did that 7.5 years ago was the fact that we thought that we would take the juice box with us essentially on trips. Well, that never ended up happening. The juice box pretty much was going to stay on the wall for the entire time that we actually had it. So we probably should have had it hardwired to begin with. This particular unit can actually hook up to a NEMA plug, but really out of the box is kind of meant to be hardwired, and that's sort of the interesting thing about it. If you're okay with that, that's fine, but in our case, we're going to have to sort of figure out what that is. Now, you can buy NEMA 1450 plugs basically from your local hardware store, but we may try to salvage the one that's in the old juice box. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this out. All right, nice little piece of styrofoam here. Also, one of the things that comes in this is a suction cup. You see these a lot, like say if you're actually going to be doing iMac repair, if you're actually trying to get the screen off. So I think, and I've seen this, where you actually use this to get to the inside here to get this particular screen off, so that you can actually sort of get to the inside of it when you're actually doing your install. So it's an interesting sort of engineering choice of them actually doing this, but hey, that's what they did here. So, so this particular front plate will snap in to this back plate once everything has basically been connected to. And so you've got your hot, you've got your ground, and I believe your red is going to be your red's going to be your other neutral. It's going to be as far as that goes. Usually for how these things are hooked up via via hardwire is that you're going to have 4 cables that are coming in from your electrical panel for 220 volts instead of actually 3, but you only need 3 for this. And so, oh, that's right, this isn't neutral. This is basically you've got 120 hot, 120 hot, and then you've got ground here. So that's how that works. So anyway, that is our unboxing. There is something else on this side, I think. Let's see. What do we got on this side? Or do we have anything on this side? No, this is that's the handle essentially for the actual apparatus. So that's everything. So you've basically got 2 main pieces. You've got your 1772 that's already installed and plugged in. You've got this essentially as far as for your attachment for, I assume, your hardwire mount. And then of course you've got your caddy on the wall. And then there are some screws that are over here, essentially. So you've got mounting screws for the unit itself, and then you've got mounting screws for the actual caddy itself. And so that's it. Okay, this was a little more difficult than I would have hoped, but we do now actually have our NEMA 1450 plug attached directly into the back plate of the EV Station Pro. And as you can see here, we've got our 2 hot leads, basically red and black, each 120 volts for a total of 240. And then of course we've got our green ground. And then finally there's the white cable, which these cables come with, but we don't need that here. We don't need a neutral. And so I've gone ahead and capped off with the blue 6 gauge cap there. Before we get it on the wall, let's talk a little bit about whom this product is actually for. I mean, it seems to be fairly well constructed as far as for the hard plastics, just sort of how it's designed. And frankly, because this particular one, the Lite, came a while after the Pro, you'd think that Ubiquiti has learned a few things as far as for just sort of how these things should be constructed and what should be built into them. This is the other side of this as far as this goes. And so who's this for? Well, if you are comparing essentially between the Pro version and the Lite version. The Pro version, first of all, costs $1,200, and that is way out of the price range for most ordinary consumers who have an electric car in their garage. It comes with a few tricks that the Lite version does not have, specifically the large 7-inch Connect screen, which you can do. It has basically just more real estate essentially for features regarding sort of what the charging session's doing. But while it's not doing that, you could play ads, you could play YouTube videos, you could play instructional stuff, you could play anything essentially that you feel that particular user needs. If you are part of a company that has these things, you could essentially put company announcements on them, just like you would for any other Connect screen that's managed by the Unifi platform. And so none of those things are usually necessary, for somebody's garage, although I know some people actually probably went ahead who have cost no object budgets and went ahead and got it anyway. But it's really not for them. The thing that this thing actually does have that most EVSEs don't is the fact that, first of all, it's not just Wi-Fi. There's actually an Ethernet port in here that you could hook it up to hard Ethernet if you choose, especially if Wi-Fi is not very good in your garage. And second, the other thing that you can do with this is that there is some sort of authentication essentially even for the Lite version. You can set these things up so that a card key a card key NFC device basically can actually give access to it. Well, why would you want that? Well, so let's say you're not in a single family home. Let's say that you're in let's say you're in an apartment, or if you're in a condo complex, and your association or your landlord has decided to go ahead and put these where they can actually manage them and maybe can track essentially the electricity usage per user. You might want to have it so that the particular owner of that particular unit or the renter of that particular unit only has access to that specific EVSE. And so that actually might be useful. One thing that I've also thought about, like why you would get the Lite versus the Pro in a residential situation, is that the Pro has one more thing for authentication that this thing actually lacks. This is that there is no, the Pro version actually has a small camera in it that can read QR codes. Well, why is that actually useful? Well, you can give the QR codes essentially to have somebody to have temporary access to. So let's say that you're an owner of an Airbnb. And you actually have this like outside or inside a garage area essentially that your guest may have access to, and if they're bringing an electric vehicle, you could upcharge them essentially for the ability to be able to charge with your EVSE. You could essentially, when you're actually renting to them, you could send them a QR code saying, here is the access to the EVSE for the 2, 3, how many days essentially that they're there. With this, the only way that you can do it is through an NFC card, which would be not impossible. You could essentially sort of have it so that an NFC card is waiting for them inside the unit, but those can get lost. And so that would actually maybe be a little bit more problematic than actually being able to do the QR code with the Pro. The other thing that the that the Pro could do is that since you actually have a screen, you could put instructions as far as, okay, this is what you're going to do in order to get access to it. This particular one would lack that. One of the things that I always thought that, you know, if Ubiquiti was going to build a cheaper version of the Pro, and the Pro version was out, you know, in EA hardware for a while, and then actually sort of came out for real. And if you take off this particular sticker, behind this screen is one of those little OLED screens essentially that Ubiquiti puts in all of their particular switches in order to basically just to see what the status is. That's not a lot of real estate, but it's more than what most EVSEs will actually tell you from their front screen, which most of them will either tell you nothing, or they may have some lights that essentially sort of indicate what they're doing. And if you want to get any real information, you actually have to use the app. Well, I think that the missed opportunity here was that there is a much larger screen, essentially a longer strip screen that comes with their their UDSM, their on-wall units, basically, that have a large strip. I think that they could have used something like that here to give a little bit more information, essentially, rather than a tiny little box, essentially, that you get. But, again, it's better than what the competition will actually give you. So, why would you buy this instead of one of the more established competitors out there, be it ChargePoint, be it Grizzly, be it any of the others, essentially that, or your vehicle's manufacturer. Many of them, like for Ford or GM, actually have their own at this particular point. Well, if you are a Unifi prosumer at home, then it's compelling. The $499 price for this actually is literally right in the sweet spot of competition, essentially, for some of the other products that are out there, and in some cases a little cheaper, you know, especially considering the fact that this particular unit will do up to a 70 amp circuit, which means that you can get 50 amps basically of power through this through hard wire. If you're going to do a NEMA plug like I currently have now, then that's only going to be for 40 amps, you know, but most cars really at the most only need 11.2 kilowatts worth of power, which at the most is 50 amps. And so this is in the sweet spot for that. There's not a lot there's not a lot of products out there that need a 100 amp circuit in order to get you 19.2 kilowatts. You only need that if you've got like the very, very largest batteries. If you've got a Hummer, a Silverado EVs, one of the ones that actually have like those 200 amp batteries. And even then, you probably actually won't need that. So something like this would probably be more than enough. And this one, just like the old juice boxes, you can buy more of these and actually load balance them between the circuit that you're on. And so that's actually quite useful. Why would you not buy this? It's like, well, this is a new product, or at least new-ish essentially from Unifi. And Unifi makes a lot of different things, but this isn't really their specialty. And so for the companies that just specialize in this, you may think that, okay, I might want to get, something else basically from ChargePoint, which is the industry leader. And the other thing is for Tesla. Tesla, the universal charger that they make also the design will allow you to switch between the J1772 plug, in other words, this, or the newer J3400, either the Tesla charger essentially that comes on Tesla vehicles and other ones. So if you've got a Tesla vehicle, the Tesla charger may just be better for you, because otherwise you'll be using an adapter essentially for this. And right now, Unifi does not have a particular product that does the new J3400 or NAX plug. So again, this is going to be up to you. I think the price on this thing is actually quite competitive. But again, as I said, this is still a fairly new product category for Unifi. And whether or not that this thing is going to be for you, is going to be up to you, but we'll try to essentially sort of to figure some of that out. Okay, we've now gotten the EV Station Lite on the wall here. You can see just right behind it, we've still got the bracket for the old juice box there, so I'll need to take that down in a bit. We've got the 25-foot cord for the J1772 cable up here on the hook as before. Previously, the juice box was hooked up via Wi-Fi. In this case, I wanted to do a proper wired connection back to my Unifi rack equipment that's in the basement in the next room. And you can see I've got some work to do on the floor there. But we'll go ahead and get started and actually hook this up, plug it in, and see whether or not it comes to life. It is live. Well, this makes me happy. The unit is now plugged in and seemingly has a pulse and is right now just connected to Ethernet, and looks like it is doing its first download of new Unifi software, which they all need to do, so we'll wait. So we've had the Ubiquiti Unifi EV Station Lite on our wall for about a week now. And what have we learned? Well, first of all, we've learned that it's a really good and solid product. We saw that when we were actually putting it together, when we put it on the wall. The instructions, more or less, basically were what they said. The one comment I think I might want to make about sort of the instructions is that, first of all, Unifi's instructions have no text, so that they can basically be passed around the world, and it's kind of like IKEA. However, one of the things that I noticed is that when you're mounting this thing on the wall is that there's a lot of care given to what size drill bits that you need to do if you're actually going to be using the drywall anchors, but nothing if you're actually just going to be like putting it into a stud. So I had to guess at that. But otherwise, it's up here and it's nice and stable. So what else do we like about the product? Well, again, it has a display that will actually tell you what it's doing. And most EVSEs don't have this. Now again, who is this for? This is not for someone who is basically just, wanting an EVSE and is not already invested in the Unifi ecosystem. This is really only for people who actually have that, either prosumers at home or for people who actually might be running an apartment complex. We might have multiples of these, condominium complex, or an Airbnb. And if you've got like say an apartment complex where you've got a number of them, or even if you've got a garage where you've got 2 different electric vehicles, you can ask it to create groups. There's no limit to the number of units that are actually in a group. And you can tell it, it's like, okay, we're going to split the amperage between these 2, and then basically you kind of figure it out for us. And so that's a great feature. It's something that my juice box had 8 years ago, and it's nice to see Unifi do this. Some of the other competitors have it. One of the other things that the Unifi EV Station Lite also has is access control, and this is something that's actually a little bit unusual, especially at a $499 price point. You can either do access control one of 2 ways. You can either have it via the iPhone app, or you can do it via an NFC card, and this is just a cheap hotel one essentially that you would use for a hotel room. But there's a problem with using NFC cards with this. The technology actually works, so for example, if I go ahead and try to do this, it basically says invalid card. But it's not completely invalid to my system. I went ahead and programmed this card for my Unifi G4 Doorbell Pro that's on my front door, because it allows you to actually program these third-party cards. They're not as safe and secure essentially as a proper Unifi card that you would buy from them, but these actually do well in a pinch, especially for a demo. But the problem is that Unifi Protect as an application in and of itself for cameras, yes, you can actually program NFC cards for this, but this particular unit is a part of not only the Unifi Connect application on your Unifi gateway, but it's also part of Unifi Access. And the problem is that the G4 Doorbell Pro is not technically a Unifi Access product. Well, why is that important? Well, you need to have a Unifi Access product like a G2 or G3 access point to actually be able to program these things for your system. So even though I was able to tell the G4 Doorbell Pro that I actually wanted to actually use this particular card in my system, well, it doesn't share information essentially across from Unifi Protect to Unifi Access so that this actually can use it. And that's a problem. And that's something actually I think that Unifi can actually solve, because just sharing of NFC cards between the systems should be something it does inherently. And right now it does not. So they can fix that. Otherwise, this unit has charged our car rather reliably. We haven't really had any particular problems with that. I would suggest that if you're looking at this thing for access control, though, that one of the applications that I said earlier was that for Airbnbs. You would need to have either A, NFC cards for your guest, but since there's no nice way to program these things unless you actually have a door with a G2 or G3 access point, you would actually need to have there's just no way, essentially, that's a nice way around it. So what I would suggest is that even though that the EV Station Pro is $1,200, which is expensive. It's actually a better application for the for Airbnbs, mainly because you can assign, that has a camera on it, so that's one more point that you can actually use it to protect your property as far as for just having a camera that looks around. But the other thing is that camera can read QR codes, and you can easily give QR codes to a renter for your property. It's less convenient to actually have these cards, these NFC cards around, because they can be lost. But you can easily give somebody a QR code before they actually arrive to your property. So again, are we going to keep this? I think so. I think this is going to be a good addition, essentially, to my Unifi ecosystem here in my house. But is it for everyone? No. That being said, I do like the fact that it has a display. The software has been updated recently, so it gives you a pretty good idea, essentially, about sort of what it's charging and for how long. Couple of things on the software. It would be nice if it were a little bit more reliable as far as for the charge session versus the actual time that it's actually been plugged in. And it's not, there's points in time where like, we have the car plugged in overnight, and it might only have been drawing a charge for about 3 hours, but it says that the charge time is much longer than that, even though that it was actually pulling 0 amps from the wall. Another thing that would be actually useful would be for having the Unifi Connect software to actually be able to input your cents per kilowatt hour for what you're actually using at your electric grid. And why is that important? Well, it's, you can actually literally keep track of how much the cost of your electricity. And if you are trying to actually monitor this for an apartment complex or for a condominium complex, and actually be able to serve this data for your own billing purposes, that's really important. But even for homeowners, it's nice to be able to split that up from like what this particular thing is actually pulling versus like what your total electric bill is. And that's actually very good, if you're actually trying to make sure of this. Plus, you would actually be able to just sort of track it essentially for your own cost purposes. So anyway, I do like this product. I do wish that it actually sort of came with a NACS charging port. Right now, this is only meant for J1772, and while that's fine for us, future cars will not have this. They'll have basically what's the Tesla plug, and at some point, in the next 3 years, all cars will be this way. But I don't know whether or not that Ubiquiti is going to actually sort of have an upgrade for this, as opposed to just having an adapter. So if you've got a Tesla car or something that actually has a NACS plug on it, you may want to wait until they actually have a specific plug for you. So thanks for listening, and like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the future.